Welcome to Reality, the show for teens, by teens, about teens. I'm JK, and I'm not kidding, and I'm your host. Today we'll be talking about dealing with disabilities. Now, before we start, I found a quote online that I think really represents what we're talking about. French novelist Alphonse Karr once said, "Some people grumble that roses have thorns, but I am grateful that thorns have roses." Time after time, we forget to see past our own faults, but it is in doing so that we realize that we are all imperfectly perfect. After all, what's a rose without its thorns? I believe that this really represents what we're going to be talking about with regards to people. Many people have many problems. They might not necessarily be perfect because no one is perfect. But it is learning about yourself, and through doing this, you could realize that maybe your differences between everyone else might not necessarily be things that are bad. Today I'm joined by Alex Sherling, a member of the Tourette's Association. Alex, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
Now, Alex, I'm having you on today because you have personally dealt with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like us to start off by just going over your personal experiences.
Sure. I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, attention deficit disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder when I was in the second grade, I believe. I've dealt with it ever since then. Majority of the time having to deal with it was in elementary school, middle school. Those were the most difficult times. But since then, I have joined the Tourette Association as an ambassador and public speaker on occasion when they ask me. And yeah, it's I have a lot of personal. Obviously, I have a lot of personal experience with it.
Okay. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what Tourette's is?
Sure. Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder that causes both motor and vocal tics. The short definition of tics are involuntary actions. The problem with tics is that the form they take can offend people, surprise people, catch people off guard, seem inappropriate, out of context. For example, so motor and vocal tics. Vocal tics are tics that can be heard, simply put. So if you have Tourette syndrome and you're in a movie theater, for example, and you have vocal tics and you just start either saying gibberish or making noises with your mouth like that, which is most of my tics, it can be distracting to the people around you. And it's difficult because it's involuntary, you can't help it, but it is a distracting thing. So this is why it can be difficult to live with Tourette syndrome, because even though technically it's not your fault to bother people around you, you still don't want to bother people around you. So one of the side effects is that you start secluding yourself for reasons like that.
Okay. Now, since you grew up with Tourette's, I'm sure anyone could look at you now, they wouldn't be able to tell that you were any different than anyone else. Can you tell us about how you, your parents, your friends, how you dealt with your disability?
Right. So when I was in, I would say 6th grade, that's when I had the most trouble with attention deficit disorder. I was brought into special classrooms because I just wasn't able to work on homework and classwork for no reason other than that I didn't want to, which from like a parent or a teacher's perspective, it made me look like a lazy student or a distracted student. So it and I felt bad because I couldn't explain it either. I didn't understand why I wasn't able to do these things. But as much as my parents would try to push me and do these things, I couldn't. It never worked out. My brain wouldn't allow me to process doing these very basic functions. So when I was diagnosed, we had an answer, figured that out. So I started, learning how to deal with it, which started with seeing a therapist, which was a great thing for me. I had even mentioned this before when we had talked about the bullying episode. It was very helpful for me to talk to someone who was a stranger that I could just open up to, and I wasn't afraid of being judged or anything by them. It was just an open forum for me to express my thoughts in words, which helped me understand what my thought process was. So that alone was helpful. But the therapy for Tourette syndrome, just having a friend, a confidant, helped me to grow more comfortable in what Tourette syndrome was, how it affected me, and things like that. The real turning point for me with Tourette syndrome, though, was in the 8th grade. I was in a private Catholic school. We had religion class, and my teacher, Father George, can I say names? No.
Yeah.
My teacher, Father George, he started every class with meditation, which was interesting. So meditation was, I'm going to try not to move too much, but we would sit with our hands on the desks in front of us, just flat and down. And we had to close our eyes and just attempt at best as possible, relax all your muscles and everything. The hard parts being, if you have an itch, don't scratch an itch. Closing your eyelids was a passive motion, not an active motion, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So when kids were struggling with doing meditation, don't scratch an itch. It's a tough thing, but you learn to control it. For me, it was different. For me, it's not just it's not just avoiding the itches, it's avoiding ticking, because I wasn't allowed to tick during meditation. But the context that this class put it in for me was that I had a choice over what my body did. Now, a tic isn't, at least for me, and I should preface this, I do have a very unsevere case of Tourette syndrome. Even at the time, it was a very lax case, so to speak. But for me, it was an urge. The tic started out as an urge. And I've heard this from doctors too. Tics manifest themselves as urges and then actions. So I was able to see the tics in the context of the urge. And once you have the urge, like scratching an itch, you want to satiate that. But once I got to that point in meditation, I was able to say no, basically. And like all things, you get better with practice. So I started catching the urges sooner, and I started dealing with them more and more in my own way. And it was just a matter of me telling myself in my head, this is my choice to satiate these urges or not. So over time, after doing meditation within this class over and over again, the tics just naturally started subsiding more and more as I got better at alleviating the urges before the actions took place. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool way to get rid of tics.
Yeah. I'll actually really quickly add to that. It's similar to a program Tourette Syndrome Association. Tourette Syndrome Association just went through a name change. We are now the Tourette Association of America. We are no longer the Tourette Syndrome Association. So forgive my misspeaking. But the Tourette Association advocates a method for dealing with tics called CBIT, which, if I'm going to get this right, I know you wrote this down. I got it.
Okay.
It's a comprehensive behavioral intervention for tics.
There you go.
Comprehensive behavioral and intervention for tics. It's actually really cool. It has nothing to do with taking medicine or any external forces. It's in layman's terms, you're replacing tics with different tics. For example, if you have the tic or the urge to make a really loud sound, which is a thing that can happen, you can replace that tic using CBIT with a cough. So if you have to go, ha, or something like that, that can be a tic. You can replace it when you feel the urge by going, and that might satiate the urge. So in basic terms, that's how CBIT works from a very unprofessional point of view.
Yeah.
CBIT functions like that, and that's how it worked for me. I just replaced it with this ability to choose not to tic and take choice back into my own body.
Cool. Well, it's good that it worked out for you, and
it did work out for me, and I
works
hope
out for a bunch of other people too.
Yeah, it has. CBIT is our favorite method for treating tics right now. We've seen a lot of success with it, so I'm happy to share that story and tell more people about that. And this applies to any tic disorders. Tics manifest themselves in autism, Asperger's, Tourette syndrome, and all these things. So CBIT, I believe, is applicable to all those things.
That's great. All right, now I feel like one of the most important things when you're learning to deal with a disability is learning to understand yourself, learning to understand what you're dealing with. So how did you first understand what you were going through as a kid?
It was difficult because my earliest memories have me thinking that they were just habits. Like there was just things that I got used to doing and I couldn't help doing for some reason. Like I have to touch this elbow and I have to touch this elbow. I just thought it was a habit and it was something that, oh, just deal with it, stop doing it, you shouldn't do these things. No, as went to a doctor who was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, like, oh, I actually have trouble avoiding these things. A sincere reason, which was good. It made me feel better about myself because at the time it was, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be a good person? Basically, like that's the thought process that goes through your head when you're younger and you're doing something your mom tells you not to do. Like the popular Tourette's syndrome is cursing. I'm not sure. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Like people call Tourette's syndrome the cursing disease, which is an utter misnomer. Which is not to say cursing can't be a potential tic. It's just that cursing is a way that tics can manifest themselves, if that makes sense. So yeah, what was the question?
I was asking you how you learned to understand what you were dealing with.
Learn to understand what I was dealing with. Yeah, and it was just a long process that was helpful with doctors, and then realizing that what I was doing isn't my own fault, which helped me just calm my own mind and my own emotions. But the next important step, which is actually a really big point in my mind, is understanding that Tourette's syndrome wasn't an excuse either. Because that's the dangerous next level I've seen, not just people with Tourette's, but other people take. If they have a disability, it can get to a point where I'm doing these things, I can't help them, oh well. Now the world just has to deal with me as the way I am. And that never happened in my head. In my head, I always needed to know that my actions I was still responsible for my own actions. Whether they were from a mental disability or physical disability or not, I was still responsible for my own actions. And I think that's one of the main reasons why the meditation was so helpful for me, because it put into a context that, yes, I have an urge to tic, but it's still my choice whether to satiate that tic. Like it's your choice whether to scratch an itch. And it's hard not to scratch an itch, but you can do it. And that's the message that I like getting across to people with Tourette's syndrome or anyone struggling with any sort of disability like that. You know, it's difficult not to scratch the itch, but you can do it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like that sometimes, but I'm proof that it is at least possible.
Yeah. Now, the next thing that I want us to go over is people with disabilities being bullied. Mm-hmm. Now, I saw some pretty scathing statistics online. Approximately 4 times more likely are you to get bullied if you are dealing with a physical disability. Mm-hmm. So do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, sadly, it makes sense. If you have a disability, I assume that means you stand out. Whether that's a good or bad thing, that's not the relevant question. The point is, if people see you as something different from their peers, you will stand out, and unfortunately, people or kids at a certain point in their life feel like different is bad, I guess, for some reason. I don't know why we think that way ever. So it makes sense that having a disability can only encourage bullies to target you, so to speak. And dealing with it is the same way anyone has to deal with a bully, which is, you know, putting on a thick skin and understanding why they're bullying you as well. I don't even know, I can't say I know the mindset of a bully necessarily, but I assume they don't really understand why they do it either, except it's sort of a game for them, and they have an objective, and their objective is to make you react in such a way. Like if I start pushing you around and you yell back at me, I have achieved my objective as a bully, which is getting you to make a big hissy fit, and you're going to run back to the principal or your parents or whoever, and I think that's hysterical. I don't actually, but I think that's the mindset of a bully, is that they have an objective, and for no good reason, they will fulfill that objective. So if you are able to understand that, you can sour their objective. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to maybe even push you around. And physical abuse is a problem. And if that does occur, I believe like one of the better solutions is to absolutely go to someone responsible, someone in charge, because you can't let that happen to you. You shouldn't, I don't want to say you shouldn't defend yourself, but fighting back isn't really the answer. If you can avoid fighting at all, that's always the answer, and that's actually a lesson I learned taking martial arts and self-defense classes. The best thing that you can learn in a fighting class is how to avoid the fight in the first place, because those are the fights that you win, is the fights you can avoid. But yeah, if there's physical abuse, find someone responsible, let them know what's going on, and if they're not helpful, it doesn't, just keep going. Just keep doing it. If they keep telling you, if they keep pushing you back, you keep going to them. Eventually if you come back with proof, like a bruise or something, if that's what it takes for them to actually do something about it, they should do something about it, assuming they're doing their job well. As far as dealing with verbal abuse, I mean, they say actions, or what is it? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Yeah, just like, say whatever you want, make fun of me all you want. Yeah, I don't want to hear these things. I have Tourette syndrome. I have glasses. I have a lazy eye. Like, or whatever your problem is. I guess understand it. Know that the bullies are just gonna come at you, looking for that emotional reaction, and don't satiate them. Don't give it to them.
Well said. Now, lastly, I think that we should learn to talk about how people without disabilities could learn to accept people with disabilities. Now, I think as a person who has suffered through disability, is there any connection that you've had or any empathy that you felt towards other people with other disabilities or with disabilities similar to yours?
You know what? I'm going to say you said it better than anything I can say. Or maybe not you, your quote. What is a rose without its thorns? It's sappy. It's a flower joke. But the message there is that, yes, people with disabilities stand out, but everyone is unique. This person with, I have Tourette syndrome. That makes me unique in a way, but I'm unique from you, obviously. And you and billions of other people do not have Tourette syndrome, and none of you are alike. So that lesson alone is understanding that people don't need to conform to a standard, because there isn't a standard. Everyone is unique. So it's really, my point is, it's silly to think that people with disabilities should be, treated differently, I guess. They're perfectly functioning human beings. I actually just watched on a video a bass player with Asperger's, and he just gave he did a speech in a conference about how he perceives the music he plays, and how he feels like, his disability with whatever